Today I'm going to talk about what we know and what we don't about human learning. Decades of neuroscience research has had little impact on education. We can put someone in a scanner, ask them to think, and then see which parts of the brain light up. But that won't help us teach. Cognitive psychologists, on the other hand, have made better progress. Without attempting to understand the physiological mechanism, they've observed patterns of cognitive behavior and established some fundamental principles about how human beings learn. One of those fundamental principles is that the more knowledge you start with, the more easily you'll learn. Let me demonstrate. Here are two statements of rules. Number one, the hooker throws the ball between the two lines, and the player who catches the ball can either keep it and set up a maul or pass it on. The opposition cannot touch a catcher whilst he's in the air, and holding, shoving, or levering are all offences punishable by a penalty kick. Number two, a weak hill during a hot barely makes it a yard back. A hot watch from the team that won the hot plays it forward, but it rebounds off the hot to a point behind the hot watch's first kick. The same hot watch plays the ball forward again. The correct call is play on. These are both tricky, using specialist jargon and without context. But if I asked you to restate them, most of you would do a better job on the first one. Why? Because the first is from rugby, so you probably have some pre-existing familiarity, having seen a line-out or knowing about forms of play like a maul. And as that explanation unfolds, therefore, you can quickly form a mental picture of what's going on. But notice, much of the contextual detail is not stated, but is provided by your pre-existing knowledge, which gives meaning, and we remember meaningful things more easily. In contrast, the second example comes from Winchester College football. So unless you're a Wickhamist, you won't know the rules, and quite often not even then. Perhaps you've been told what a hot is, but by the time you've sifted through your memory to recall that it's like a scrum, you've lost the thread about the movement of the players and the ball, which means you'll get stuck if you're asked to recall the rule or apply it. This has nothing to do with intelligence or concentration. But the efficiency of learning is dramatically affected by background knowledge. The more you know, the more you'll learn, and the more you'll know, and the more you'll learn, and so it goes on in a virtuous circle. Conversely, if you know less, you will learn less. I'll give you a real example from an English lesson from a colleague of mine a few years ago. The class was studying Animal Farm, and they read the passage where Napoleon presented the commandments of animalism to the assembled animals. So, the teacher said, these rules are about how to live. What do they remind you of? Silence. These commandments about how to live? Again, silence. Well, what about the 10 commandments? Nothing. These children had never heard of the 10 commandments, so there was a layer of meaning embedded in the text by Orwell that they entirely missed. And the teacher then had a choice to cut their losses and move on with a superficial understanding, or do a lengthy detour to introduce them to Moses and stone tablets and stories of oppression and liberation. But whatever decision she makes now, you know that the book had less impact on these children when they read it for themselves, and they're going to learn less in the allocated time in their English lesson. So if the quality of learning is a function of how much you already know, there are significant implications for education and education policy. First, those who are serious about maximising learning need to structure the curriculum really carefully. For children to learn at higher levels, they must first be taught a broad, well-integrated base of background knowledge relevant to the subject. But this isn't easy. If you make the curriculum very narrow but very deep, then the benefit of having prior knowledge is very tightly constrained. You can't, for instance, just dedicate all your time to maths and English, because the background knowledge acquired through history and geography and music and languages and science all helps children grasp new ideas about the world. On the other hand, the background knowledge has to be robust. Studying a little bit of everything doesn't help you assemble a coherent conceptual framework to which new knowledge can be attached. Learning that's a mile wide but an inch deep can have the effect of a strobe light with 1,000 flashing images, disjointed and very confusing. Intelligent judgments have to be made, not just about whether particular knowledge is valuable, all knowledge is valuable, but about what can intentionally be used as building blocks. That's something we call powerful knowledge. For instance, the ideal would be to study all the great philosophers in the same depth, but that's impossible. So in constructing a curriculum, we'll have to be discerning. Aristotle and Confucius are both great thinkers, but the later focus of study may require us to choose one of them earlier on. And if we spend more time on contemporary literature or South American or Asian or Indigenous literature, then we will spend less time on the Western canon. And all of it is good, but you can't do all of it equally well. Now, that's an uncomfortable position because no one wants to seem to devalue or reject another body of knowledge. But there are too many good things in the world to teach all of them in school. A more realistic approach is to accept that we're preparing young people for a lifelong exploration of the world and that our job is to give them an excellent start. We don't have to beat ourselves up for not delivering the end product by the age of 18. By the way, this is yet another advantage of Div because we can use it to introduce seminal ideas that provide a conceptual framework that underpins further learning across the curriculum. And the versatility and flexibility that come from being unexamined make it more useful than, say, doing another A-level or GCSE, which is tightly constrained by the exam syllabus. The second implication for educational policy is that we need to be careful about how much of life skills we try to fit into the timetable. There are endless calls for schools to deliver life skills, but the public debate never addresses the obvious question of what should be displaced to make room. I've been keeping a rough list of topics for which campaigners want more school time. Carbon monoxide awareness, how to detect cancer symptoms, infant brain development so the next generation become better parents, gardening, fertility, obesity, politics, climate change, media and digital literacy, tattoos and piercings, pornography, sexual consent, drugs, gambling, endometriosis, how men should respect women, oracy, signs of grooming for extremism, and this is just in the last year or two. The importance of, say, carbon monoxide awareness is unassailable. But for the sake of the children, we need to be honest that every minute spent on that content is a minute lost to something else. So what should it be? Shakespeare or trigonometry or river systems or the history of the Civil War? Good educational policy is going to have to confront this challenge rather than pretending that there is no opportunity cost. But in the meantime, here at Winchester, we are clear that doing the most important things well entails doing less of the rest, as good as those things are. Connected to this point, I think it's worth mentioning the fantastic results our pupils have been achieving in Olympiads recently, a demonstration of how firm foundations generate first excellence and then, at the most advanced levels, great breadth. Our pupils, and that includes even some of the youngest ones, work well beyond the curriculum and often at university level. So in this half term alone, 49% of our pupils who sat round one of the Biology Olympiad achieved gold medals, compared to 5% nationally. There were also 8 silver and 5 bronze awards. In the UK Linguistics Olympiad, 5 pupils won gold, 7 silver and 8 bronze, and 1 pupil, Zachary in college, had the highest score in the country. In the Chemistry Olympiad, over 95% of our 70 competitors gained a medal, and 75% gained a silver or gold, compared to 34% nationally. 3 pupils in the junior years won gold in a competition which is actually designed for 18-year-olds.